keep the contract in my office now. All 340 pages of it. It lives in a red folder on the credenza behind my desk. Not filed, not archived. Just there.
I've read it 12 times since they brought me in.
I find something new every time. My name doesn't matter for this. What matters is that I'm a senior lawyer at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Resources. I've been there 19 years. I draft concession agreements. I review procurement terms. I've seen 100 contracts move through this building. I was not one of the 3 who reviewed the Aqua Capital agreement before it was signed. That was 2009. I was brought in 8 years later.
After the suspension.
Let me tell you exactly what happened. In 2009, the government of Makera Republic signed a 35-year water concession agreement with Aqua Capital International, Luxembourg-registered infrastructure fund. The agreement gave Aqua Capital exclusive rights to operate and price the capital city's water supply. In exchange, they committed £180 million of infrastructure investment over 7 years.
The contract included Clause 47C. Buried on page 127 in the force majeure section, it permitted suspension of service during periods of commercial non-viability, defined as any 90-day period in which operating margins fell below 12%. 30 days notice to government, no financial penalty. In 2016, Aqua Capital requested a 34% tariff increase. Our government refused.
Their margins fell below 12% in December, stayed there for 91 consecutive days.
On March 3, 2017, they issued suspension notice under Clause 47C.
Our government did not believe they would actually do it.
On April 2, 2017, Aqua Capital suspended water service to the capital city.
4 million people.
23 days.
Service was restored April 25th, following emergency government capitulation on the tariff increase. The clause had been reviewed by 3 separate government legal teams before signing.
None had flagged it.
They brought me in on April 26th. The minister wanted to know how this had happened, how 3 legal teams had missed a clause that allowed a private company to turn off the water supply to 4 million people with 30 days notice and no penalty. I was given the contract at 9 a.m. I found clause 47C at 9:11 a.m. It took me 11 minutes. I remember sitting there in the conference room, the red folder open in front of me, page 127, clause 47 subsection C, right there in the force majeure section where you'd expect to find earthquake provisions and acts of God. Very clearly written, actually. Commercial non-viability, 90 days, 12% margin, 30 days notice, no penalty. It wasn't hidden.
It was just there.
I wrote my report that afternoon, 6 pages. I explained that the clause was standard commercial protection language that had been adapted for infrastructure concessions in jurisdictions with unstable regulatory environments. I explained that it created an asymmetric risk profile heavily favouring the concessionaire. I explained that equivalent clauses in other jurisdictions typically included financial penalties, mandatory arbitration, or government override provisions during humanitarian emergencies. This one had none of those. I explained that any competent legal review should have flagged it for renegotiation before signing. I did not explain why 3 separate teams had not done so. I had theories. I did not put them in the report. The minister read my report. He thanked me. He asked me to stay on as lead counsel for the water portfolio going forward. He wanted institutional memory. He wanted someone who understood what we were dealing with. I said yes.
I moved the red folder to my office. I have read the contract 12 times since then. Not because I need to, I know what's in it now, but because
I keep finding things. The first 5 readings were procedural. I was documenting risk, mapping exposure, building a framework for renegotiation when the concession comes up for review in 2044.
the 6th reading was different.
I started seeing the architecture. These contracts are not written to be understood by both parties equally. That is not their purpose. They are written to create certainty for one party and the illusion of certainty for the other. The precision is not for clarity. The precision is for enforcement. Every clause that protects Aqua Capital is written in clear direct language. 12% margin, 90 days, 30 days notice, no penalty. Every clause that protects the government is written in qualified dependent language, subject to reasonable commercial judgment, notwithstanding prevailing market conditions, unless otherwise mutually agreed.
One side has numbers.
The other side has adjectives. This is not accidental. On my 8th reading, I found the payment subordination structure in Section 19. It establishes that in any dispute over tariff calculations, Aqua Capital is entitled to continue collecting at the disputed rate until arbitration concludes, which takes on average 31 months. They've been doing this for 6 years.
We are currently in our second arbitration.
They are collecting at a rate 41% higher than the last government-approved tariff. The government is not allowed to discuss this publicly under Clause 89A. On my 9th reading, I found the infrastructure ownership provisions.
All capital improvements made by Aqua Capital during the concession become government property at the end of the 35-year term.
That sounds good.
Until you read Clause 34D. Capital improvements are defined as projects that extend the useful life of existing infrastructure. Projects that expand capacity or improve efficiency are classified as operational enhancements. Operational enhancements remain Aqua Capital property. Aqua Capital determines the classification.
Every major project they have completed in the past 8 years has been classified as an operational enhancement. In 2044, we get our old pipes back.
They keep the new treatment plants.
On my 10th reading, I started calculating. The government has collected approximately £230 million in revenue sharing over 8 years. That's the percentage of gross revenue we receive under the agreement.
Aqua Capital has collected approximately £1.4 billion in gross revenue over the same period.
They invested £180 million. Their net position after 8 years is positive £590 million. We have 27 years remaining on the concession.
At current rates, they will extract £4.7 billion by 2044.
We will receive £900 million. We will also receive our old pipes back.
These are not projections.
These are the terms. This is what was agreed.
Signed by our government.
Reviewed by 3 separate legal teams. On my 11th reading, I found myself asking a different question. Not how did this happen?
But what else is in here? What else did they put in that no one has found yet?
On my 12th reading, I found clause 71B.
It's in the default and remedies section, page 198, very clearly written.
If the government defaults on the concession terms for more than 90 consecutive days, Aqua Capital has the right to acquire the national water infrastructure outright at book value. Book value,
Not market value.
Book value is what the assets cost to build, depreciated. Market value is what they're worth now.
Book value of the national water infrastructure is approximately £400 million.
Market value is approximately £6 billion.
Default is defined in clause 71A.
Any failure to comply with the material terms of the agreement constitutes default. Material terms include all payment obligations, regulatory approval timelines, and dispute resolution procedures. I spent 4 days reviewing our compliance record.
We have been in technical default since April 4, 2017. The government missed a dispute resolution filing deadline during the suspension crisis.
We were 8 days late submitting our arbitration response. This constitutes default under clause 71A. That was 2,417 days ago. I have calculated this several times to make certain. The 90-day threshold was exceeded in July 2017. Clause 71B has been enforceable for 7 years. Aqua Capital has not exercised the option.
Yet.
I found this 6 weeks ago. I have not told anyone. I wrote a memo, 3 pages, very clear. I outlined the default sequence. I documented the threshold. I explained the acquisition mechanism. I calculated the book value. I noted that clause 71B does not expire. It remains available to Aqua Capital as long as the default condition persists.
The default condition is permanent. We cannot cure a missed deadline retroactively.
I put the memo in an envelope. I put the envelope in my desk drawer. People think I'm deciding what to do with it. I've already decided. I am deciding when. Because here is what no one understands about these contracts.
They are not mistakes.
They are not failures of legal review. They are mechanisms. They are designed to create specific outcomes at specific moments under specific conditions. Clause 47C created the suspension. The suspension created the capitulation. The capitulation created the tariff structure we now have.
The tariff structure creates the revenue that makes the concession profitable enough to be valuable.
Clause 71B creates the option to acquire that valuable concession at a 93% discount. The default creates the conditions under which that option becomes available.
None of this is accidental.
None of this is hidden. It is all written down.
Page 127. Page 198.
Right there in the red folder. 3 legal teams reviewed this contract before it was signed. I found clause 47C in 11 minutes. I found clause 71B in 8 months. I keep asking myself if they found them too. I keep asking myself what they were told when they did. I've been a lawyer for 26 years.
I have worked for this government for 19.
I have reviewed perhaps 300 contracts.
I've never kept one in my office before.
I keep it because I'm still reading it. Because I find something new every time. Because I think there is more. The memo is still in the envelope. The envelope is still in my drawer. Not to see if it's still there. To remind myself what I know.
To remind myself that knowing is not the same as acting.
To remind myself that there is a specific moment when knowledge becomes either protection or complicity.
I'm still trying to determine which moment this is.
Last week I read the contract a 13th time. I found clause 103F. I have not written a memo about it yet. The red folder is behind my desk. All 340 pages. I will read it again tomorrow. I checked the drawer this morning before I came to record this. The envelope was gone. I stood there for perhaps 40 seconds, my hand on the drawer pull, staring at the space where it had been. The drawer locks. I have the only key. I've had the only key for 19 years. I closed the drawer. I walked to my desk. I sat down. I opened my laptop. I began typing the clause 103F memo. That was 3 days ago. The memo is finished now. It is 7 pages.
Single-spaced. Times New Roman 12.1-inch margins.
The same format I have used for 26 years.
Clause 103F concerns jurisdiction.
Specifically, it concerns which courts may hear disputes arising from the contract. More specifically, it concerns which courts may not hear such disputes. The answer is all of them. All of our courts. All courts within our borders, under our laws, subject to our constitution. Any dispute must be arbitrated in a private tribunal. The location of the tribunal is determined by the other party. The arbitrators are selected by the other party. The proceedings are confidential by default. The decisions are binding and cannot be appealed.
We signed away our sovereignty in a subclause on page 267.
Between provisions about office supplies and vehicle maintenance.
I wrote this in the memo.
All of it.
I also wrote what it means when combined with clause 47C.
I wrote what it means when combined with clause 71B. I wrote what it means when all three operate together. The memo has been on my desk for 2 days. Printed. Not in an envelope.
Just paper clipped.
Face up. Yesterday afternoon, the Deputy Minister called me to his office.
I have been called to his office perhaps 30 times in 19 years.
Always during business hours. Always with his assistant present to take notes. Yesterday there was no assistant. The call came at 4:47 in the afternoon. He asked me to come at 6:15. After most people had gone home. I brought the red folder. I brought the memo.
I did not bring anything else.
His office is on the 8th floor. Mine is on the 4th. I took the stairs. I'm not sure why. Perhaps because elevators keep logs. The hallway was empty. His door was open. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I sat. He stood. He said, "You have been very thorough." I said nothing. He said, "I understand you have found several concerning provisions." I said, "Yes." He said, "You have written memos." I said, "Yes." He said, "How many?"
I said 3.
He walked to his window.
Hands behind his back. Looking out at the city.
He said, "The first memo was recovered from your office last Thursday." I said nothing. He said, "It has been reviewed by the appropriate parties." I said, "Which parties?" He did not answer.
He turned from the window.
He said, "The contract cannot be voided." I said, "Because of clause 103F." He said, "Among other reasons." I said, "What are the other reasons?" He sat down. He folded his hands on his desk. He looked at me for the first time since I entered. He said, "There is a broader arrangement." I said, "Broader than a 40-year contract?" He said, "Yes."
I said, "How much broader?"
He said, "That is not your concern." I placed the red folder on his desk. I placed the memo on top of it. I said, "This is my third memo. It concerns clause 103F. It explains that we have surrendered jurisdictional authority to a private tribunal controlled by the other party. It explains that this, combined with the financial provisions in 47C and the operational provisions in 71B, constitutes a transfer of sovereign functions to a private entity. It explains that this may violate our constitution. It explains that this definitely violates our procurement law. It explains that someone needs to inform Parliament." He did not touch the folder. He did not touch the memo. He said, "Parliament was briefed."
I said, "When?"
He said, "Before the contract was signed." I said, "They were briefed on these specific clauses?" He said, "They were briefed on the nature of the arrangement."
I said, "That is not the same thing."
He said, "No."
I said, "Who briefed them?"
He said, "The minister." I said, "Was the minister aware of these specific clauses?" He stood again. He walked back to the window.
He said, "The 3 lawyers who reviewed this contract have been reassigned." I said, "To where?"
He said, "Different departments, different cities. One is no longer with the government."
I said, "Did they find the clauses?"
He did not answer. I said, "Did they write memos?"
He said, "I cannot discuss personnel matters." I said, "This is not a personnel matter."
He said, "Everything is a personnel matter eventually." I stood. I said, "I need to know if they found the clauses. I need to know if they reported them. I need to know what happened after they reported them." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I need to know if reporting is dangerous." He said nothing. I said, "Because I need to know if silence is mandatory." He said nothing. I said, "Because I need to know if I am the only person in this building who believes our laws still matter." He turned from the window. He said, "You're not the only person." I said, "Then why?" He said, "Because believing laws matter and believing you can enforce them are not the same thing." I walked to the door. I stopped with my hand on the handle. I said, "What happened to their memos?" He said, "The same thing that will happen to yours." I said, "Which is?" He said, "They will be filed." I said, "Where?" He said, "Somewhere safe." I said, "Safe for whom?" He did not answer. I left his office at 6:43. I took the elevator this time. This morning I received an email from Human Resources. Subject line, reassignment opportunity. A position has become available.
Different department.
Different city. Same grade. Same salary. Start date 3 weeks from Monday.
The email says the position would benefit from my particular expertise.
The email says my current project can be transitioned to other staff. The email says a response is requested within 48 hours. I went to my office after reading it.
The red folder was gone. From behind my desk.
All 340 pages. My laptop was still there. I opened the file directory. The contract PDF was gone. All 3 memos were gone. The entire folder was gone, even from the recycling bin. I checked my email archives. Every email referencing the contract was gone.
Sent folder.
Received folder. All of it. I sat at my desk for 20 minutes. Then I walked to the 4th floor filing room. I asked the clerk for the contract file. The physical file. The one that contains all original documents related to procurement matters. The one that, by law, must be maintained for all government contracts. She looked at me. She checked her system.
She said, "That file is restricted."
I said, "On whose authority?"
She said, "I do not have that information."
I said, "I'm senior legal counsel on the review team." She said, "I understand, the file is still restricted." I said, "Can you tell me when it was restricted?" She checked her system again.
She said, "Last Thursday." I am recording this in my car. In the parking garage beneath the building. Level P3.
Space 47, where I have parked for 19 years. This is the only copy of this recording. When I finish, I will put it on a USB drive. I will mail the USB drive to someone I trust. Someone outside the government. Someone who will know what to do with it. Or perhaps I will not.
Perhaps I will erase this recording. Perhaps I will accept the reassignment.
Perhaps I will tell myself that someone else will find the clauses eventually. Someone braver. Someone with less to lose. I have 43 hours left to respond.
I keep thinking about the 3 lawyers.
Where they are now. Whether they think about the contract. Whether they sleep at night. Whether they tell themselves they had no choice. I keep thinking about the moment when knowledge becomes complicity. I thought I was still trying to determine which moment that was. I was wrong. I've already determined it. It was the moment I found clause 47C.
Everything after has been a delay.
The question now is not whether I know. The question is whether anyone else will.
I'm starting the car now.
I'm going to drive to a post office in a different part of the city. I'm going to mail this recording. Then I'm going to go home.
Tomorrow I will respond to the email.
I will decline the reassignment. I will request a meeting with the minister. I will bring a copy of the contract that I have kept at home. The one I printed on my personal printer 2 weeks ago. The one no one knows about. I do not know what will happen after that. But I know what happens if I do nothing.
I've known for 11 minutes.
And 8 months. And 3 days. This is what it means to be a lawyer. Not to know the law.
But to know when it is being broken.
And to decide whether that matters more than your career. More than your safety. More than your silence.
I have decided.